I was very intrigued when I heard the theme of your discussions today, beyond conformity. And in the kind of work that I do, I don't know what you think of politicians, but mostly we are the most abused community today. But I always think that's grossly unfair, because there is politics and there is politics. And I believe that when we look at the way the country is run today, the kind of politics which are dominating our public space today, certainly I believe that the conformity of that politics does need to be questioned. And therefore, I told my young friends when they asked me, what would you like to speak on? And I said, well, maybe we can discuss the whole issue of conformity and non-conformity, and what these concepts really mean for those of us in politics, and I think for most thinking people, because whether you are directly involved in politics or not, you cannot help be touched by politics, because politics basically decides the direction of our lives, whether we like it or not. Politics decides policies. Politics decides allocations. Politics decides priorities. Politics decides, for example, who can get into an IIM and who cannot. Politics decides whether a young boy or a young girl living in one of the tribal populated areas of this very state of Jharkhand will ever have the opportunity to come to a great institution like yours. So therefore, I think to just shun politics as being so absolutely gross and something that we all have to get away from, I think that is really a self-defeating exercise for young people today. So, and I believe it is very, very important also to look at the kind of boundaries that exist in public spaces and in political spaces today. I don't know if you know about that very recent incident which happened just a few days ago in Birbhum, just across the border from Jharkhand, in fact. Now, there is a village there called Lapur. And in that village, which is a tribal-dominated area, there was a young girl, just 19 or 20 years old, who in the course of her work and in the course of her life, I think she used to go to school a little further away. And, you know, there are many mines in that area. And there's a large minority community also living just around that area. And she fell in love with a young Muslim boy. Now, one would have thought, in a country which talks about inclusive politics, one would have thought in a country which talks about inclusive growth, that a young tribal girl falling in love with a Muslim boy would surely be her personal decision. And if she did not want to conform to what was expected of her, that too would have been her personal decision. But what happened? What happened is something so absolutely outrageous and so reprehensible, which outrages anybody with even the most minimum social conscience. This girl was called publicly, humiliated, tied to a tree, and then certain people got together and decided that she was a nonconformist. She did not conform to what was expected of her, and therefore they asked her parents to pay a fine of 20,000 rupees. These are poor people. Where would they get 20,000 rupees from? And as punishment, A, for falling in love with someone out of her community, and B, for being a member of a poor family who could not pay 20,000 rupees, her punishment was that she was gang raped. She was raped by 13 men. Now, when we, you know, it's quite, we glibly talk about conformism and non-conformism. But sometimes when you are nonconformist, in a country like India, which is still deeply committed to a caste system, nonconformity can result in being gang raped by 13 men simply because you fell in love with the wrong person. Now, the question that I raise here is before you, that you're young people here, you're the future of this country. I know that the issue of merit is very, very important in our lives. When there is a small cake, when the pool of employment capacities or possibilities is limited, when fewer people have access to opportunities, well then, certainly the issue of reservation can prove very contentious. And we can say, well, look, merit is all. And if I'm a meritorious student, why should somebody else who belongs just because they belong to a backward caste or a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, why should they get that benefit of reservation? I can understand the angst, I can understand the frustration. Sometimes I can even understand the anger. But what I cannot understand is the divorce of the requirement of reservation and quotas from the reality that today still a very, very small percentage, you would be shocked to know that only 1% of tribal students, 1% of tribal students ever make it to a higher educational institution. It's not because they're not bright. It's not because they don't want to study. And when I heard this young person here from Thane, in his absolutely brilliant presentation of how technology and communication changes the world, it was such an inspiring talk. And you come from Thane. Thane is an area where there is a very, very large tribal population, just as Jharkhand is. But what do we need to do to break those boundaries which exist like iron bars in a prison, which make it impossible for those young people to break out of that prison and say, look, I'm here, I'm one of you, I live in a country which recognizes my equal right of citizenship. So when we talk about nonconformism, I believe that sometimes for a lot of people, nonconformism has to be and is a driver, the agent for social change. And therefore, I know a large section of our population who want to break those boundaries, who want to break those prison walls and come out into the sunlight of equal opportunity. But unless we allow them and give those sections who today are deprived of that right to trod the same path, well, I think reservations is absolutely required. Affirmative action in different ways is absolutely required. And I believe that the conformity today among many of the young people who think that merit is all that matters needs to be tempered with a deeper understanding of the real meaning of equality in a system which is based on deep, deep inequalities. The second thing that I really wanted to talk to you about today, because I think that is one of the issues which is of deep concern. And when I heard our friend speak about religion, I don't think Karl Marx ever said religion is going to end. Karl Marx always said that wherever there are the oppressed, religion is the sigh of the oppressed, because religion provides solace, religion provides succor, religion sometimes provides hope, whether or not that hope is fulfilled, whether or not the succor is given, those are things which can be debated. But the reality today is that yes, it is true that we see a proliferation of, I would say, not spiritualism, but we see a proliferation of ritualism. And I can tell you as a woman that much of the rituals associated with religion are deeply anti-women. I'm not saying necessarily that religion per se at all is unequal or does not believe in the equality of men and women. But yes, I do assert today that in the name of religious tradition and in the name of strong fundamental interpretations of what religion and religious tradition and belief are, there is a terrible stereotyping of what, quote unquote, a good woman should be. She's a good mother, she's a good daughter, she's a good aunt, she's a good grandmother, she's a good wife, she's everything, but she is not a woman. A woman with her own desires, a woman with her own needs, a woman with her own ambitions. Why is it today that our cultural framework, on the one hand, which promotes the so-called modern woman, which is equated with being pleasant to the male gaze? I mean, if you're looking good, if you're giving the look, and if you're getting the look, well then that's what modernism is, and here you are, a modern woman. But is that what it is? Does a modern woman not go beyond her sexuality? First of all, to recognize her sexuality. First of all, to respect the sexuality. First of all, to respect the integrity of her body. But my point here is that because of our upbringing, our training, the way that we think, the most modern minds, and sometimes, unfortunately, even the most religious minds, I don't know, you won't agree with me because that's very far from religion, but we know what many so-called God-men have been doing today, but I don't want to go into that. But what I do want to say is that for a woman to conform today means to accept a baggage of tradition which promotes a particular role for that woman, which may or may not be her own choice. If I choose to be a woman, working at home, looking after my children, and I'm happy doing that, yes, that is my right to do so. And nobody can denigrate me as being, quote unquote, a mere housewife. Similarly, if I'm a woman going out to work, deciding not to get married, deciding not to get children, I should not get stereotyped as being, अरे कुछ तो इसमें कुछ गड़बड़ तो है, नहीं तो शादी क्यों नहीं हुई है, इसके बच्चे क्यों नहीं हो रहे हैं. If a man decides not to get married and remains a bachelor, अरे ये तो इसमें इतने गुण हैं, इतना सन्यासी आदमी है, देखो सारी कुर्बानी दे दी अपने परिवार के लिए. And if a woman decides to do that, they say, कुछ तो गड़बड़ है भाई, इसलिए तो शादी करने के लिए कोई आया ही नहीं था, वो बेचारी क्या करे. The point is this: when we talk about modernism and when we talk about conformity and non-conformity, unfortunately today, as far as the approach to women are concerned, it is very, very skin deep. And therefore, I would say that it is essential today for young people, particularly young people. We saw in the streets of Delhi, after that dreadful Nirbhaya case, we saw how so many young men joined hands with young women to come out in the streets of Delhi and say that we respect a woman's autonomous space. That is what is critical. Do you respect, do you recognize, and do you permit, because that's what it comes to, permission. Why? I have an autonomous space. I fight for that autonomous space, and if your traditions don't accept it, I say, too bad for you. You are the people who have to change. That is the voice of young women today. And I think it is absolutely essential for those of us in politics to also recognize that, because we see to a great extent the kind of sexist language which is used not only by men, but by women too. You recently heard the lady from Maharashtra who said, it's the clothes that women wear. Don't wear inviting clothes. If you wear inviting clothes, you're inviting violence. So those are some of the kind of outrageous comments which I think, unfortunately, in a large part of our society, they have become the order. They have become conformity, and therefore I think it is essential to go beyond that. And along with that, because I started by speaking about religion and religious tradition, and I do want to take that up, because a very disturbing feature today in our politics is the use of religion for political mobilization. And I think that is what is extremely dangerous for our country, for our polity. It's not the question of this or that platform, of this or that political party. It is the very essence of India. If we start dividing India in the name of religion, how can we ever claim to be a democratic country? Democracy, after all, is not just 5 years of voting rights. Democracy goes far beyond that. Democracy goes into the recognition of the differences that individuals may have. The differences could be there based on our cultures, our languages, our religions, but innately and basically, it is India, after all, which must beckon us if we are thinking of a brighter future. And therefore, the very idea of India to be linked to this or that religious community, I think it is abhorrent to any great country like ours, which claims to have such a great civilization. And I think this is another area where conformity and non-conformity become very blurred, because after all, you can say, when I'm talking about religion as a main driver of my life, this is a particular type of conformity. On the other hand, you can also say that I challenge the conformity of secularism. So the basic issue here is non-conformity and conformity really rests on a more moral and ethical question as to conforming to whom, conforming to what, non-conforming to whom, and non-conforming to what. So it is this basic moral and ethical question, I think, which we have to search for in our answer to the question, are you a non-conformist or are you a conformist? I believe that sometimes, for example, me, I am a conformist. I'm a conformist to secularism. I'm a conformist to the very idea of equality or democracy. I'm certainly not a conformist. I'm a strong non-conformist as far as caste is concerned, as far as the use of religion as a political instrument is concerned. So we have to decide a basic set of values on which we should live our lives, whether we are professionals, whether we are managers, whether we are engineers, whatever we are in life. I believe that if we as Indians work out a very basic set of universal values, which many, many years ago, Dr. Ambedkar did try to enshrine in our Constitution, I don't think we can go wrong. We can only go right, because I believe, I mean right in the sense of the right path, not right politically, in case any of you, मतलब अगर आपने सोचा कि आपकी स्टेज पर आकर मैंने राइट को राइट कहा और लेफ्ट को गलत कहा, ये मैं कतई नहीं कह रही हूँ, but I do believe that if we as Indians share those universal values, and particularly you, young people who are going to take this country forward, I don't think we can go wrong. And I would like to congratulate you again for this very unique theme that you have chosen, which can bring so many people together. And I hope you do decide that for India, you need democracy, secularism, and you do need a set of policies which recognize that India can never go forward, can never be a great country as long as such obscene social and economic inequalities exist. And therefore, this whole concept of democratizing healthcare with the use of technology, I think is quite inspirational that young people as brilliant as that young man we heard from could dedicate themselves moving out of big multinational companies to startups to help people. I think that is really an idea which is a universal concept which we can all adopt. And therefore, thanking you once again, and I hope that we are together on the same page, that conformity and non-conformity really depends on who you are challenging and who you are supporting. Thank you very much.